Welcome to Overwatch. This time we're going to do something a little different, but something I want to do more often as the scene grows and develops. We're going to look into specific teams in the pro scene and talk about what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong. I'll also say here, the background footage is from the GosuGamers Weekly North American number 7, the final specifically, and in it is the subject of today, IDDQD. Now, you're probably sat there thinking, Josh, why the hell should I care about pros in the beta? Two reasons. First, there's a lot to learn from just seeing how these teams work together and function. Second, Overwatch is fun as hell to watch when you understand it. It's one of the most complex games around in terms of all its functional parts, FPS mechanics, rapid movement, twitch skills, alongside correctly assessing ultimates and team comps. And with proper balance and stewardship, Overwatch could become a beautiful game at the highest levels. And right now, one team is dominating those high levels, IDDQD. Named for the old God mode cheat in Quake and Doom, IDDQD has existed since the early days of the beta in one form or another. Originally formed from a group called Hulk-tastic Mix, named for Internet Hulk, the team's off-role player basically, they had mixed results until starting the second phase of the beta. Since then, they are undefeated in matches and have only dropped maps to Reunited.gg, Fnatic's old Battlefield lineup, Google Me, now Cloud9, Flat Earth, a new team that I have very high hopes for, made up for some of the strongest players in Europe, and one drop map to a team called Who is Vainless, which is a mixed team made of some of the more formidable names in EU Overwatch. Since the beta returned, IDDQD are a 71-10 win-loss on maps. Now that's astonishingly high, that's ridiculously high, and what's even more impressive is that in EU there is definitely no lack of talent. While North America enjoys dominance from two top teams, currently Cloud9 and Envious, who recently showed a solid performance in the GosuGamers NA Weekly number 7, EU is a little muddier and harder to read. Teams are yet to sign up to major organisations, although I'm positive big orgs are sniffing around and making offers, and will often fragment and blend into each other. This is the first thing I actually attribute to IDDQD's success. They play against a wide variety of teams and players, but since the beta come up have had comparatively few changes in the roster. The most recent being the addition of Menokusai in favour of Taimu, largely due to the Genji-centric meta and Mendo's attitude on the hero and Taimu's weakness on it. This is something that's going to be a recurring theme from me, so let's get the ball rolling here. Having a stable team for a few months is going to separate the first front-running teams in Overwatch. It's also worth noting that I've heard that IDDQD is probably the hardest working team in Overwatch right now, putting in the most hours in scrims, and it's showing, basically. Now back to this sticking together point, because we saw it in Beta 1 with the North American teams Hubris and Not Enigma and the European team Melty all performing ahead of the competition. Ask anyone involved with the pro scene at that time and they were the teams everyone was trying to beat. Consistent scrimming, knowing how they all reacted and played, and knowing their roles within the team helped keep everything smooth. Overwatch is a fast game to play, and eliminating uncertainty in communication and swapping is an easy way of getting an advantage over your opponents. It's certainly not the sole factor. If it were, Cloud9 would be dominant, but it's an important one, and this is one of my fears for Europe's scene in the long term. If rosters don't start locking down, I'm expecting a pretty heavy skill gap for a while between the top teams and the rest. In short, Flat Earth, if you watch this, try and stick together. Now, I've talked a lot about things outside of the game, but where skill is made, of course, is in-game. Now, while there's talented players on many rosters, IDDQD is more stacked than a mid-90s porn star. Even before the change to the double Zenyatta meta, I'll get onto that in a moment, back when Taimu was on the team, they had a player pool where everyone on the team knew their role in the meta and knew how to use their hero optimally. Internet Hulk honestly stands out to me as an unsung hero of the team. Fairly aggressive on Winston and devastating on Symmetra, Hulk's judgments have led to plenty of won games with strong Winston ultimate knocking people away, for example, and his Symmetra is probably the most lethal in the game at the moment, and that's really important right now. So let's talk about the double Zenyatta comp. The double Zenyatta comp is of course a comp that runs two Zenyatas. It also runs two flankers, which are Genji and Tracer, or most often two Genjis, Symmetra, and a final fill slot, something like Lucio, Junkrat, or Reinhardt for example, generally rounding out the team, varying on depending what's needed. And this is currently the standard meta. And I think IDDQD are the only team that runs the comp where I see Symmetra routinely get kills. A small efficiency increase, sure, but where most teams run a buff bot, Internet Hulk makes her into a major factor and a threat. And this is a big deal because Pluppy, or Tavik, do let me know what you want to be called some, and Mendo Kusai have developed a frightening synergy and know how to make the most of the comp. The two carry players have developed an immediate bond and it shows. They both favour a heavily aggressive style that's both showboaty and effective in the current meta. In doing so, they create enough space for the rest of the team to stay on the payload and score incredibly rapid times. They're also flexible, willing to adapt and send one of them back to help Internet Hulk, for example, if his teleporter becomes under threat. The net result of this is it puts pressure on the other team to set an equally fast time to match the constant pushing IDDQD manages. That means they have to run the double Zenyatta comp, which means they either die to a solid defense or IDDQD just running the same comp as they are but in a more practiced and better way. And let's not overlook the rest of the team. GosuGamers has been a solid player throughout the game, and reviewing footage to start this discussion is probably one of the few Zenyatas who just never seems to die. With the Zenyatta-centric meta and Mercy taking a backseat, I'll be curious to see how he fares if we do switch into a Mercy Pharah meta down the line. He did fine in the recent North American Weekly where he played a pocket to Pluppy's Pharah, but judging from the way the team plays around support ultimate so smoothly, I have no major concerns. It's also worth noting that GosuGamers deals a lot of damage on Zenyatta. He really knows how to make that damage work. Nabridgeabup, probably unique for having one of the worst names in competitive Overwatch, is a very consistent player, and I think both IDDQD supports share the same traits. They're effective, they avoid big flashy vanity plays, and they leave Mendo and Pluppy open to do their thing. In general, across any team esport, this structure usually emerges. A team made up of superstar carries can struggle as each player tries to make big plays. IDDQD's solid foundation means the aggro players have something to play off. Basically, the supports make it easy. Coco, the Reinhardt player, also very flexible, helps in being patient and level-headed. I have no idea if he's like that in comms and scrims, but he does have the comfort in knowing that at some point, Pluppy and Mendo will probably make an opening for him somewhere and then he can strike. I do see some pro Reinhardts, Winghaven, I'm looking at you in particular, can be a little over-aggro and try and open up the enemy team on their own, often getting very punished for it. Coco just has to wait patiently and trust in his carries. Even more helpful is that he can play Zenyatta, although again, with the safety screen provided by the two super carries and Hulk Symmetra actually being a threat, it calls into question how much of this is actually him. I'd like to see more games between Flat Earth and IDDQD. Someone like Lynx, I think, could really test that backline. I'll also gravitate towards Internet Hulk again as the secret ingredient. Probably one of the more versatile pros. We see him generally bounce between Winston, Symmetra, the occasional Reaper and Soldier 76, though I can also speak for his ability on Widowmaker if the team needs to pull a sniper out and Mendo is otherwise occupied. He's my kind of player, a versatile piece that can help a team comp really work and be efficient rather than just being a teleporter in 50 shields, for example, when playing Symmetra. Now that I've talked him up, let's bring him back down. Where is the flaw? How do you beat IDDQD for the $1,000,000 question? In this meta, I don't really think you can. At least not until we see some absolute top tier Genji and Tracer players get matched up with the right supports. They simply have played the comp longer and it's a perfect matchup to their style. Before then, they had an ace in the hole with Taimu, arguably one of the best McCrees around, to protect them from the Genji's pre-nerf strength. My main concern is what happens when the inevitable meta shift occurs. My concern also is with their Pharah. In particular, Tailspin and Seagull, both North American Pharah players, and Tailspin in my eyes is the strongest Pharah player in the game at the moment, although I do wish we had in-depth stat tracking to compare, both seem much stronger than the IDDQD equivalent in Pluppy. Watching Tailspin play Pharah is one of my favourite things to do in competitive Overwatch, and while Pluppy's Pharah is decent, if the Pharah meta does return, I can see Seagull and Tailspin both emerging as the new superstars. While Mendo's Widowmaker could put a dent in that, I think North America's current high ground centric meta could see the tide turn. I'd also be curious to see more matches of King in the Hill in particular. IDDQD's favoured style favours the payload maps, where Genjis can make space for the payload to safely keep advancing. In King of the Hill, some of that luxury is removed and they have to start to resort to more standard comps. It might be easier just to open them up. That being said, if they had to advise a team going against them, well, if you're playing the payload, play for time, not kills. They have a tendency to set very fast times and then force you to play to their style, and they'll beat you with it. We saw things like Double May come out to attempt a stall from some of the American teams, but honestly, try a single May and Reaper for example. Get the slow and bag a Genji, or run something that could dash past the Genjis to swamp the Zenyatas. Do not play into Mendo and Pluppy's hands and fight them, that's what they want. And even if they don't immediately score kills, they're getting time and that's what wins. Force them onto volatile maps. Their preferred style favours payload. Everyone plays more on payload. It's the least volatile game type where the better team is most likely to win at the moment. That said, King of the Hill pushes them onto a style where they'll still be incredibly strong, but no longer the complete dominant force. And finally, stop playing them at their own game. Set your ego aside, they're incredibly practiced at the double Zenyatta style, so avoid playing it. If you're in a tournament during these early days, then sure, it's probably fine to practice against them, winning as a scraps right now after all, but down the road as prize pools get bigger, you've got to know that they are the kings of the current meta. I was happier to see Cloud9 try things like double May than to see teams just try and mirror IDDQD blindly. Unless you're regularly beating them in scrims, play to your strength, not theirs, because theirs is beating you with double Zenyatta. Let me finish in summary by saying how they're different from other teams. They're different because they're relatively stable, the meta plays into their style, and they're better at that style than their opponents. They probably have clearer comms and the supports know how to react properly when things start to get bumpy. They control momentum in games and play beautifully, dictating the terms of the match by setting fast times to bait teams into meeting them on their own game. I think teams going against them need to think in terms of stalling their attack rather than just trying to win against it. Slow them down, then play your style. It seems safer than playing theirs. Thanks for watching to the end. I'll finish up with a shout out to two sites in particular, Liquipedia first and foremost, a beautiful resource for any esport and a strong database. I'm glad to see them involved in Overwatch so early. And second, the GosuGamers website, as that has some very in-depth stat tracking from all major tournaments and has been very helpful in compiling some of this information. I've been Josh, as one voice amongst many, and I hope this was an interesting look into IDDQD. I might follow this up with some post-commentary looks into a few of their matches to highlight their strengths and some of their weaknesses perhaps. Doodles.